One.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ankerstar Wealth Market Update. I'm your host, Alice Ankerstar, and today we'll be talking about what to do when you receive a corrected 1099-B, the current restrictions on trading Russian investable assets, and lastly, what this morning's surprisingly strong jobs number means for the markets. But before we begin, as a reminder, this is a financial education presentation and should not be construed as personal financial advice. Full disclaimer information is available at ankerstarwealth.com. Good morning, Steve. Yesterday, Schwab sent out a notification that several clients received a corrected 1099-B. What does this mean, and does this mean that people will need to file an amendment to their taxes?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Allison. This is what it looks like for the 1099-B. I'll show you a couple different screenshots. So you probably got an email if you're affected. If you didn't get an email, you're not affected. Or you can, if you really want to be super sure, you could log in to either TD Ameritrade or Schwab or whoever your custodian is and go back and check. But these things happen from time to time. You're basically looking at the 1099-B itself. So go under your tax forms and search. And then when you find it, it'll say corrected on it. So this is what you're seeing when you see the corrected there, is you see the bottom right here. Here's your culprit. So why do these things happen? We'll start with that. Whenever a security, or a company, a security in this case, you can see the CUSIP number there. If they they're supposed to send out all of their information, I think by February 1st. Well, if they make a mistake or if they need to make a correction for whatever reason, then they have to issue that information out to the custodians. And then in turn, the custodian now has to issue that corrected 1099-B. The more complex you're investing, again, the higher your odds of doing this. So in the case here, you can see in bold here where it says corrected, the culprit is this U.S. diversified real estate holding called ticker PPTY. Well, that's been one of our best holdings. On our sheet, it's been in our top 10 because of the anticipated inflation. Of course, it's run up nicely, but now you get a little correction in there. So that's one screen that I will show you for the correction, and then show you another screen here for what it looks like on the main page, which is this one. You can see corrected at the top, but the Form 1099-D div, which remember 1099-B is your brokerage account. So that's the main one. That's for a taxable account. If you're holding this in a non-taxable account, then it doesn't matter. But for the 1099-B, inside of that, you're going to see the 1099 div, 1099 INT, and then the capital gains information or losses information. And so with that, when you see this, you'll see the correction at the top, and then you can also tell that it's the dividends that are affected, and then there's different rules applying to different dividends. So in this case, since you have real estate, it's a little more confusing. So it affected which one, how much of it is qualified. You can see like half of it's qualified here. And then there are also non-dividend distributions involved. And there's also section 199A, which I'm not going to go into, but not a tax person, not trying to do your tax versus consult your tax professional, all of that standard type of disclaimer. But that's what you're looking at. Last one I'll show you is, these 1099-Bs can be several pages. So as you look through it, you're going to see different corrected things on different parts of that form. So ultimately, what does that mean? Yes, likely if you have already filed, you may be looking at an amendment. I have not particularly gone deep into see how much of a change this was. If things are less than $1, then you won't need to refile. But yeah, overall, you'll probably need to refile an amendment, which is very easy to do if you're using TurboTax, or unfortunately, you'll have to reach out to your tax provider / CPA, and they may charge you a little bit for running that amendment for you. But yeah, ultimately, you're going to need to check it out and look into it.
Next, the Russia stock market has been closed for the last 5 days, and the Russian securities are being dropped from major indices. What does that mean for investors?
Well, it's kind of crazy to think, Russian stock market's been closed for 5 days. So we'll talk about that. First, just imagine the U.S. stock market being closed that long, and you think, people freak out when a stock gets halted or the whole market's been halted. If you think back to March of 2020, which is kind of recent memory for a lot of investors, the market was halted, several times during that March timeframe. And then also, if it's halted, there's certain circuit breakers in there. And at some point, if it's halted within this, this close to the close, then it doesn't reopen at that point. And we saw some of that. I know for sure we saw it in March. I saw a headline I was trying to find specific examples this morning of when the stock market is closed before. But yeah, it has happened. It is here in the US is kind of my point. So of course it's happening over there. We're layering sanctions on them like never seen before. But over here, it has happened. It happened in 2012 for Hurricane Sandy. The market closed. It is also closed for weather before, and especially in the New York area. Closed for 2 days in 1888. That's a long time ago, right? And then, of course, 9/11, we saw the market close. So there are times in our history where the market has closed. And of course, it's always a priority to get the markets back open so money can flow, economies can thrive, that sort of thing. So when you're, I really doubt that many of you are invested directly into Russian securities, but also there's an indirect effect here. So if you log into, TD Ameritrade, you can see important update trading Russian securities, liquidity assets, rapidly evolving situation. So then, of course, they have a place for you to click here to see exactly what's involved. And I clicked on that. So let's show you this real quick. So yeah, here's these are not names I have heard of, right? I mean, I've heard of Aeroflot because I'm a pilot, but other than that, most of these I have not heard of. These names, you're not likely to be in them. However, the names are being screened. If you're in an ETF that's all maybe European, there may be they can be going through and screening some of these names, removing them from the indices, and then replacing them with other names. So I kind of bring this up really more just to go, hey, this is going on. And you think, okay, sanctions won't affect me. And Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, said, well, there can be spillover in, where all this interconnectivity and globalization, there can be spillover if a major company starts, going down the tubes, if you will. So he said, just realize that it may not be free, right? There can be contagion issues there. But anyhow, here's some of the, if you have a bank account in Moscow, you've probably already realized you can't get money out of it. There's a run on the banks. The interest rate in Russia was raised over double, up to 20%. Ours is at 0. Theirs is at 20%. Russian bonds, if you're in Russian bonds, good on you for taking that level of risk. And I say that jokingly, meaning probably not good on you. But look at these interest rates. These we're paying anyway, 7.5, 12.75. These are not bonds you can find, and in the US. And if you're in this stuff because you ran a screener online and said, oh, I can do this myself. And you're like, oh, look at this sweet bond that's paying 12.75% in Russia. Russia's a big company. What could go wrong? Yeah, well, okay. There's sometimes more to think about that than just running a screener. But just wanted to show that to you. Am I worried about it affecting the U.S. financial institution? No, but the people, not long term. I mean, of course, we could see anything happen this year because we don't know how it's going to play out. Attacks on power plants and now taking over the nuclear power plant in Ukraine and the headlines of the day. But long term, no, it could have a short term effect on the U.S. Financial markets. But I guess to sum it all up, I would say that. If you're invested in this stuff, you're stuck until it opens back up for trading. So you have to just kind of wait it out.
Last, the February jobs number was surprisingly strong this morning. Will that help drive the stock market higher?
Well, generally, a jobs number is one of the major things that drives the the market. So I have kind of the headline pulled up here. So from CNBC this morning, and we talk about market forces on here. There's never just one thing driving the market. Now, sometimes there's one headline that can sensationalize everything and drive the market. But over the long term, you need to think about multiple forces acting on a body, if you will. Back to Physics 101. Shout out to the physics crew that's in that class. But the multiple factors. So we do have the war waging in Ukraine, and you start talking about taking over nuclear power plants. That's scary, right? The loss of life, of course, is adding up. The sanctions are only getting heavier over time. I do think that those headlines are going to overshadow the stronger than expected jobs report. But there are some, when you look at the actual number, here it is. It's flashing that blue and yellow there. If you can see it, the economy added 678,000 jobs last month. Okay. And so a lot of this is local and it's different depending on where you live, but certainly in a major area, you could actually have negative employment. It says the country's employment's down to 3.8, but you could actually have negative employment. We're talking about that in San Francisco. There just are not enough people to work the job. So, met a client for lunch 2 days ago. And again, half the restaurant sits empty because they don't have the servers and they can't find them. Now, this is where when you think, okay, inflation's bad, well, wages need to inflate with it. And of course, a lot of business owners can't immediately inflate the wages, right? But if you don't, people are going to walk and you're not going to have people serving. So you can end up with negative unemployment, which means you just can't find people to work. And I know a lot of people are frustrated with that, but that is a reality that we have. So when you think of, the reason I bring this jobs number up is there's a lot of scare talk out there. And of course, we're going into election and it's going to be hyper politicized and all that. But the one thing about if somebody starts talking recession to you, you can say, how is it possible you can have a recession when unemployment's so low, when everybody is working? Not everybody, but below 5%. I mean, you could say that historically, that's kind of an everybody's working kind of number. So the recession fears, to me personally, are completely overblown. But to conclude, lots of forces different way on the market. I think it's great that we had a nice jobs report this morning, but I think the negativity will be kind of a hangover from the Ukraine thing until that resolves, which again, due to weather, I do expect it'll be just like 2014. Things will wrap up one way or the other by the beginning of May or so. That's my take.
Thank you everyone for your questions. Please submit your questions as a comment through social media or directly to our email at vipservices@ankerstarwealth.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to get daily updates. That's all we have for today's show. I'm Allison Ankerstar and we'll see you back here tomorrow.